This is a story about war, about those who caused it, about those who took part in it, about those who committed crimes and bore the burden of them. And no matter how long they fled, they always remained on their conscience and on ours. This is the story of escape routes, of cities that served as refuge, of regimes that protected, of pursuits that seemed to be the final destination, but were not destinations after all. Of people who, for us, seemed like anyone else, anonymous, grey. But beyond their apparent transparency, there was a veil concealing the impiety of fascism and war. This is their story, and with it, inseparable, indissoluble, also ours.
The Spanish Civil War was a real test for the armed forces of both Italy and Germany, because it was in Spain where they were able to work out if their planes were any good, if their ships were any good, and also it gave thousands of German troops a lot of training in the battlefield. So this is really, really important. It's like a kind of preparation for a much bigger war.
In 1936, Spaniards suffer the ravages of one of the most intense, long, bloody and brutal wars in modern history. Completely destroyed cities, famine, disease. Following the coup d'etat, Francisco Franco envisaged a rapid end to the war. The main war aim of the rebels was clear: to take the city of Madrid and thus gain control of the rest of the peninsula. The troops, under the command of General Varela, began a rapid advance towards the capital, which they believed they could easily take.
Si me quieres escribir, ya sabes mi paradero.
Against all odds, the Republican army thwarted Franco's advancing forces. Madrid was the scene of several clashes. One of the most important took place at the new campus of the university, where they engaged in a fierce battle to take the capital.
Y aunque nos tiran el puente y también la pasarela. Y aunque nos tiran el puente y también la pasarela, nos verás cruzar el Ebro y en un barquito de vela. Nos verás cruzar el Ebro y en un barquito.
After the battle, there were no changes on the front. The Republic had withstood the attack. The front in the university city, whose apex was the university hospital, survived until the end of the Civil War. The battle in the university city became a symbol for all Republicans and Democrats around the world, and a failure for Franco's troops. There was only one objective: the capture of the capital, a stronghold of resistance punished by the bombing, which refused to give in. On March the 28th of 1939, Franco ordered the start of the final offensive on Madrid and the rest of the territory. The troops defending the capital began to abandon their positions. The rebels occupied the French Bridge and several buildings in the university city without resistance. The surrender of the Republic was inevitable. Almost 3 years later, the national side achieved its main war aim. On March the 28th, Republican Colonel Adolfo Prada, with several members of the Republican Army, appeared next to the Hospital Clínico. Near its ruins, they declared the surrender of the Republic to Franco's Colonel Eduardo Losas. The war is over, and with that triumph, Franco is indebted to the Nazi regime and fascist Italy.
The key to understanding the transformation from an anti-fascist city, a symbol of they shall not pass, to a pro-fascist city, pro-Nazi of we passed, is violence. The threat of violence, repression, imprisonment. You cannot rebel against a new power that has been established in the city.
Gritaban por las calles, no pasarán, se oía a todas horas, por plazas y plazuelas, con voces miserables, no pasarán. Ya hemos pasado, y estamos en la cama, ya hemos pasado, con alma y corazón, ya hemos pasado, y estamos esperando a ver caer la boca de la nación.
Ramon Serrano Suñé, Franco's brother-in-law and one of the most important Francoist leaders, closely linked to Hitler's regime, wrote the following words in the Falangist newspaper Arriba. "We must create a new Madrid, a Madrid with the moral grandeur that befits the capital of heroic Spain." Since 1937, the rebellious official gazette of the Spanish state had approved the obligatory fascist salute, so all the photos and official acts of the time show many people with their arms raised in the air. Madrid began to change, from a Madrid of resistance to a Madrid symbol of fascism.
It is part of the scenography of parades and mass services. Any excuse to create the apparent adherence and fervour of the population, to make it very clear that this is the new Spain.
In addition to these events to transform Madrid's international image as a fascist city, it was also necessary to organize other events to attract the eyes of the rest of the world.
In this international context, one of the options is to invite international fascist leaders so that they can see in situ what will be called the glorious resurgence of Madrid.
Count Ciano, Italian foreign minister, and above all, the husband of Mussolini's daughter. He is an extremely important man, because Ciano is already considered to be, possibly, heir apparent, the man who will replace Mussolini in 20 years.
Ciano landed in Madrid on July the 15th, 1939. The Franco regime welcomed him with open arms, in the presence of some of the highest-ranking authorities. Ciano paraded in the streets of Madrid as if he were a war hero, amidst cheering crowds. Finally, he presided over a parade of 140,000 Falangists, belonging to the local and provincial sections in the Castellana Avenue. After the parade, Ciano arrived at the University City, where the Republic resisted during the 3 years of the war. For the Franco regime, the University City was a symbol of its victory in the war. Franco's authorities used Ciano to send a message to international fascism. Spain's capital is ready to put aside its republican past. Heinrich Himmler, one of the most important members of the Nazi Party, leader of the SS, and the architect of the Holocaust, was on a diplomatic visit to Madrid. This visit had several objectives: to strengthen Spanish-German relations, since the meeting between Franco and Hitler in Hendaya was just a few days away, and to initiate collaboration between the Spanish police and the Gestapo, which later opened an office in the German embassy. Madrid was decked out for the occasion. Streets decorated with Nazi flags, blue shirts, red berets, and raised arms. Himmler was greeted by phalangists and members of the armed police corps. Later, he met Franco at the Pardo Palace. Afterwards, Himmler attended a bullfight offered in his honor at the Las Ventas Ring and was greeted with great applause upon his arrival. The next day, Himmler also visited the Prado Museum, a Phalangist aid organization, and the National Archaeological Museum, where he carefully studied a map of the Germanic invasions. The visit was a success. Himmler found a subservient city. The message was clear. Madrid could be considered a capital of National Socialism.
It was a short visit, with not many details from a historical point of view. But all historians agree that in the meeting with Serrano Suñé and Franco, Himmler laid the foundations for political collaboration and closer links were established between the Spanish police and Nazi agents. The collaboration of the Spanish police and the Gestapo and of the Nazi spies in Spain was tremendously important.
With the consolidation of relations between Spain and the fascist powers, Madrid became an ideal place for the Axis information services. From 1939 onwards, Italy and Germany increased their diplomatic presence in the city. The Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence service, headed by Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, began to operate. It conducted political, economic, and military espionage in search of reports on the aircraft industry and anti-submarine warfare. Abwehr espionage networks in Portugal, Switzerland, and North Africa paid huge sums of money for any information that could be leaked about this. In 1940, Madrid, and by extension all of Spain, joined this network, as German agents could act with impunity in Franco's Spain. Rather than drawing Spain into the conflict, German intelligence services focused on stabilizing the Franco regime and securing its continued support for the Third Reich's war effort. To do this, the German ambassador in Madrid, Eberhard von Storer, appointed Hans Lazar, feared as a ruthless officer, as head of all propaganda activities. Lazar knew how to operate efficaciously, expanding his agenda with several contacts within the Spanish government, the Falange, and the main newspapers. He regularly held meetings with the editors of ABC, UP, and other newspapers, as well as with Phalangists linked to the press department.
Hans Lazar is a key figure in Spain in the 1940s. He's a very elegant man, immaculately dressed in a suit with his little moustache, his hair slicked back, his monocle, his shiny black shoes. Lazar was the head of propaganda at the press embassy in Madrid with a significant team of people under him. He did a very important job for Hitler at the time because he mastered propaganda in a brilliant way.
Lazar ensured that the Spanish press presented a favorable view of Germany, which fostered distrust of Great Britain. Lazar's department was Germany's most effective propaganda agency outside its borders. The Franco regime, which had very good trade relations with Germany, supported its war machine with raw materials. The relationship was so strong that Franco sent the Blue Division, a military unit of volunteers and phalangists, to join the German infantry in the invasion of the Soviet Union. The Axis began to fall apart. Despite the apparent superiority of the Reich, the Allied armies started gaining the upper hand, once German General Rommel's troops in North Africa had been defeated. On the night of the 9th-10th of July 1943, Allied forces landed on Sicily. It was the first time the Allies set foot on European soil. In a few days, Mussolini's dictatorship collapsed. On the 24th of July, faced with this situation, the Italian Fascist Grand Council met. Most of its members rebelled against Mussolini. They voted to break off with Germany and return command to King Victor Emmanuel III, who ordered the arrest of the dictator.
In the summer of 1943, Mussolini's regime fell. Some fascists began to say, war is not going as it should. It's a matter of time before the Axis loses the war. We have to start thinking about what will happen if we lose the war. Where are we going to flee to? And since Franco's Spain had not entered the war, Spain was considered as a destination, albeit an intermediate one, in the planning of the flight.
With the fall of the fascist regime in Italy, rumors began to circulate that the Duce and members of his regime were seeking refuge in neutral territory. So, the Allied government sent a memorandum to all neutral countries warning against granting asylum to war criminals.
The US expects that no neutral government will allow its territory to be used as a refuge.
Sweden, Ireland, and Turkey were unwilling to give asylum to fascists trying to flee. Europe awaited Spain's response. Franco's authorities were still undecided regarding the possible arrival of the refugees. As a result, support and escape structures emerged for fascists from countries such as Italy and France, and for Nazis in Germany who were being persecuted. Rat lines were created.
Rat lines is a name given by the Allied secret services when they realize that many of these war criminals are on the run. When the ship of the Third Reich is sinking, these are the rats who jump ship, searching for escape routes to save their lives, to save their skins.
Reaching safe territory was not easy. It required the collaboration of many people and considerable logistical structures, places to hide, money to pay for accommodation, food or tickets, or contacts to obtain the relevant documentation, passports, safe conducts, photographs, identity documents that were usually forged. All this required a considerable level of organization. This is why not every city could be part of the rat lines. It was necessary to have a network of contacts, a government in tune with it, and a pre-established structure.
When you hear the word rat line, you think of a very organized and formal process in which Nazis are escaping. But rat lines are anything but. They are very informal, very loose, and essentially what they are is they are a connection of people living in towns and villages who know the person in the next town and village. So if you're a Nazi wanting to escape and you turn up to a town, you're given shelter, perhaps in a pub or a hotel, and then what happens is maybe a telephone call or a message is sent to the next town to say, can you look after this man? He's going to come tomorrow. So that's how initially a Nazi will travel down a rat line. But what Nazis also need is false documentation.
Thanks to the rat lines, many Nazis, fascists, and other war criminals found a safe haven within the Franco regime. However, the Spanish authorities reacted differently depending on the person arriving. Many less important soldiers or collaborationists crossed the border into Spain through the Pyrenees. They were often arrested as soon as they arrived in Spain. Afterwards, they were sent to concentration camps like Miranda de Ebro, Nanclares de la Oca, or even to Carabanchel prison. The situation was more complex if the person fleeing was a fascist of great political relevance. Allied pressure put Franco's government in a bind. But these people had contacts within the regime. Powerful people, who operating via diplomatic channels, were able to secure the freedom of war criminals in Spain. 3 rat lines created in Madrid started to operate. The first rat line was that of Johannes Bernhard and Clarita Stauffer.
Johannes Bernhard is this really fascinating figure. He's essentially German, and he had fought in the First World War for Germany. He had won a medal. And after the war, he became a very successful businessman in Hamburg. But then that business collapsed, and he ends up in Spanish Morocco. Now, it's from there that he starts to ingratiate himself with the fascists, and he even meets Franco.
In 1938, Bernhard created Sofindus, a company set up to promote trade relations between Spain and Germany, whose offices were located at Generalissimo Avenue No. 1, very close to Columbus Square, almost facing the German embassy in Madrid. Sofindus would serve to channel all the aid that Franco's government sent to the Third Reich through the Pyrenean railway station at Canfranc.
Sofindus' objective as a company was to make money. How important is Sofindus for the rat lines? Well, the rat lines need money. That's why Bernhard is such an important figure. He has political contacts, but he also has the economic strength to enable the creation of these structures.
One of Bernhard's objectives was to guarantee the supply of raw materials for the Nazi war machine, mainly tungsten, a key element at the time to reinforce the armor of tanks, which was easily found in Galicia. Between 1941 and 1943, Spain sold 3,300 tons of tungsten to Germany.
Tungsten was extremely important. The main suppliers of tungsten to Nazi Germany were Spain and Portugal. They were the leading producers of tungsten in Europe at the time. Johannes Bernhard, a short man with a hat and a long overcoat, used to go in his official car to the mines in Salamanca or Galicia, buying tungsten from whoever would sell it to him, and then look for shortcuts to transport the tungsten by whatever means possible.
Faced with the imminent defeat of the Third Reich, Bernhard organized a meeting in April at his home in Madrid at Valley Avenue No. 3. The objective was to create the Bernhard Rat Line to try to help his compatriots who wanted to escape from Germany. 32 of the most important members of the Nazi community in Madrid attended the meeting. Among them probably Paul Winzer, Hans Lazar, Heinrich Hoffmann, Eberhard von Störer, Wilhelm von Vaupel, Reinhard Spitzi and Clarita Stauffer, perhaps the most important figure alongside Bernhard. Clarita Stauffer, a woman of great importance in the escape network, single, sportswoman, swimmer, skier, close friend of Pilar Primo de Rivera, a firm and determined woman in her National Socialist ideas.
Her father ran the Mao Brewery in Spain, so, he had money and she was very well connected. She realizes that helping hundreds, if not thousands of Nazis escape is going to cost a lot of money. Clothes have got to be bought, shoes have to be bought. This network isn't just going to run on air. And the person who's providing all the money for this particular rat line is an industrialist called Johannes Bernhard. And it's thanks to Bernhard that Stauffer is able to run her kind of empire, if you like. And she works incredibly hard at doing so.
Clarita Stauffer, according to what one of her nephews told me, had in her house dozens and dozens of shirts, socks, shoes, boots, pants, canteens, all kinds of items to help the fleeing Nazis at the end of the war.
Despite the fall of Germany, Bernhard was able to maintain his business. The good relationship he had with the Allies meant that at the end of the war, he was in an ideal position to continue his activities, living in Madrid and Denia. Bernhard was a clever man who looked after his own interests regardless of his ideology.
We must understand that as the war comes to an end, the Allies initiate a plan to seize all possessions of Nazi Germany, or linked to Nazi Germany in neutral countries. This is what they called Operation Safe Haven. Nazi Germany has been defeated on the battlefield and must also be defeated economically.
While collaborating with Nazi Germany and Franco's authorities, Johannes Bernhard informed the Allies of everything that was going on. He was part of Operation Safe Haven, a program of the Allied powers aimed at ensuring that the Third Reich did not hide money in neutral countries, as Spain was supposed to be.
When Bernhard saw that this might actually affect the network of companies that Sofindus had created, he managed to convince them that these companies no longer served the Nazis, but they were nevertheless very useful to Franco's regime, that they are very useful even for international trade, which means that allowing Sofindus to continue to exist was something that benefited everyone, but no longer benefited Nazi Germany.
Many Nazi war criminals arrived in Madrid via Bernhard's escape route. The most relevant case was that of Otto Skorzeny. Skorzeny was one of the major figures in Bernhard's extensive network of contacts. He was a remarkable man, a legendary SS general who, working directly for Hitler, led the liberation of Mussolini, who had been arrested by the new pro-Allied government in Italy. His exploits and scars gave him a reputation that preceded him wherever he went. After World War II, he was arrested, fled, and after hiding in Germany and France, arrived in Madrid, where he settled permanently. Skorzeny was a well-connected man. He had loyal friends, people with money who were willing to help him. Using the networks created there by Johannes Bernhard, Skorzeny was able to create a front company on the Gran Via in Madrid, which allowed him to earn a lot of money, protected by the Franco regime.
He is the man who is creating, from his house in Madrid, an international network of spies, superheroes, super soldiers, people who are somehow also organizing spectacular actions in the global fight against communism.
The second escape route to be set up was the Italian one. Arturo de Agostini was an Italian businessman who lived in Madrid, in Ibiza Street number 22, near Retiro Park. He was a little-known man, very discreet regarding his actions, but highly efficient in the Italian escape line. He had been running a very popular ice cream parlor in the center of Madrid, in Alcalá Street number 72, where pro-fascist Italians who were in the capital used to go. It was a kind of meeting point. De Agostini knew that the situation of his comrades in Italy was not easy, so he wanted to set up a structure to help them find refuge in Spain.
De Agostini is a fascinating character, but we do not know much about him. The British intelligence services in 1945 and 1946 wondered who De Agostini was, as he appeared more and more in the reports of British operatives in Madrid. People said that the Italian pro-fascist community was increasingly rallying around the figure of a certain Arturo de Agostini, and they asked, who is this person? The answer was, we have nothing. We don't have information about him. He doesn't hold any position in the Italian diplomatic network. He has never worked for the government. He is a member of the fascist party, and he is beginning to gain prestige, because he must have been a very affable person, a very expansive person, charismatic and committed to the cause.
However, De Agostini was a civilian without the necessary contacts to set up such a complex structure as a rat line, which required considerable resources and a strong network. At that time, he contacted Eugenio Moriali, a Mussolini government diplomat in Malaga, who had been the representative in Madrid of Fascist Italy, known as the Italian Social Republic, the RSI. He also had several contacts within the Spanish government and other members of the Italian embassy. De Agostini and Moriali were responsible for reorganizing and unifying the Italian community in Madrid.
In Madrid, Ambassador Paolucci di Calboli is pro-Allied. And that shocked the consul in Malaga, a man called Eugenio Moriali, who went to Madrid, met with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and negotiated a sort of unofficial title of Ambassador of the Italian Social Republic in Madrid. From that moment on, Eugenio Moriali became the key person for the Italian pro-fascist community in Spain.
Thanks to the influence of De Agostini and the contacts of Moriali, financially backed by Princess Pignatelli, the Italian rat line was operational in 1945. Both helped their persecuted compatriots who were trying to flee. As the Allies took control of Italian territory, many fascists loyal to the Duce fled to Spain with the objective of fleeing to South America.
De Agostini is one of the people who brings money from Italy to Spain. He is one of the men who organizes not only the escape, but a real political network. De Agostini has an important influence thanks to Princess Maria Pignatelli of Corbara, Ruffo of Calabria, who helped war criminals not only to escape, but also to rebuild a life. We know that the possibility to flee was there, but after they had escaped, what then?
One of the most important people to arrive via the Italian escape route was Mario Roatta. Roatta was one of the most important generals in fascist Italy, a man in whom Mussolini had total confidence and was appointed head of the Italian secret services. He had a lot of military experience. He was commander-in-chief of the Italian troops that supported Franco in the Spanish Civil War. He also took part in the Second World War in Serbia, where his cruelty became well known. At the end of the war, he was arrested and imprisoned in Rome, awaiting trial by French or Italian courts. But Roatta managed to escape and took refuge in the Vatican, where Bishop Alois Udall was helping Nazis and fascists to escape.
Mario Roatta is not just anybody. He's not just another fascist. This guy has played a leading role. A man with a very dark past and with many crimes behind him. Moreover, Roatta's case is important because it shows us how two apparently independent rat lines can even overlap and help each other, because Roatta's escape has two phases. Roatta is in a prison in Rome. He uses his contacts to escape from that prison in Rome, but he does not travel immediately to Madrid. Instead, he takes refuge in the Vatican. So he negotiates through the Spanish embassy in the Vatican. If I leave the Vatican for Spain, would you offer me protection? And this is when De Agostini takes part. He starts negotiating with the Spanish government. He says to them, Do you remember Ruata, so important in the Civil War? How through his influence he helped to channel Italian war aid and helped you win the war for Franco's side? Well, now he's in trouble, in a prison in the Vatican. He needs your support. He needs to escape because he is being persecuted by the French and by the Italian authorities.
Ruata, after settling in Madrid, became the director of an import-export firm that represented several Italian companies in Spain. Ruata was sentenced to life for crimes committed in Serbia. However, as he was protected by Franco's authorities, he was never extradited. The third and last rat line was created in early 1945. Carlos Fuldner was an Argentinian of German descent, a member of the Nazi Party and the SS. He fought with the Blue Division alongside the Spanish troops, where he worked as a translator, as his Argentinian origin enabled him to master both Spanish and German, which was very useful in the relationship between the members of the Blue Division and the Nazi army. His commitment in carrying out his mission was recognized by the commanders of the Spanish division, among them General Muñoz Grandes, who would later be very important when the help of Franco's authorities was necessary for the operation of this rat line.
The true value of the work you have done during your tenure in the division. Thank you on my own behalf and on behalf of the division, even if my general has already had the opportunity to express it personally.
After returning from the front, Karl Fuldner was in Berlin as an SS agent. He was responsible for creating an escape route for German war criminals. Several historians suggest that Fuldner's escape route was planned directly by the Nazi high commands, especially Heinrich Himmler. Sometime later, Carlos Fuldner flew to Madrid to initiate this rat line. When he arrived, Fuldner was joined by two colleagues with whom he shared a common purpose and ideology, Charles Lescar and Pierre Day.
Carlos Fuldner arrives in Madrid in May 1945, and he's this very shadowy figure indeed. And he turns up with an enormous pile of money, some works of art, and it becomes very clear that his job is essentially to organize a new escape route for Nazis that are going to go into Spain, into Madrid, and then on to Argentina. There are these two important figures that we see in Madrid by the end of the war. Now, these are two literary figures, if you like. One is a Belgian journalist called Pierre Day. He is basically a fascist, and he's fled to Madrid. And then you also have a French writer called Charles Lescar. They are both sitting in Madrid, twiddling their thumbs, not much money, and they're getting really very desperate because they've got real no means of supporting themselves. But it's the arrival of Carlos Fuldner and his big bags of money that are going to be very attractive to them, because they then start helping Fuldner run his rat line.
Charles Lescar was a French writer born in Buenos Aires, the heir of a Basque citizen who emigrated to Argentina. Politically, he became radical, declaring himself openly fascist and an active member of the Legion of French Volunteers against Bolshevism. He defended the side of the collaborationists in the Vichy regime, which supported Nazism. He was a member of the far-right Action Française party and editor of the fascist newspaper Je suis partout. One of his most significant books was When Israel Takes Its Vengeance, in which he describes his detention in a concentration camp in 1940 for his anti-Semitic views. After the withdrawal of the German army from France, Lescar fled the country, pursued by Allied justice, and after a brief period in Germany, managed to board a plane that took him to Madrid. In the capital, he found a friendly and familiar environment, and Lescar was able to help Fuldner in his rat line. He joined a group of exiled French collaborators in Madrid who had arrived via several rat lines. Hitler's troops were defeated at Stalingrad in February 1943, the beginning of the fall of the Third Reich. Many fascists were thinking about how to flee the Allied advance, among them Pierre Day. Pierre Day was a journalist, a member of the Belgian Rexist Party, very close to Nazism and the Spanish Falange. In 1944, his newspaper sent him to Madrid, where he joined Fuldener and Lesca in their rat line. With the beginning of the Allied liberation of Belgium in September 1944, he knew that he would never be accepted in his country because of his collaborationist past, as he knew was happening to many of his compatriots who, like him, had been on the side of the Nazi regime. So Day looked for lodging in Madrid. He contacted the owner of the luxurious Palace Hotel, Georges Marquet. Marquet was the owner of the Ritz Hotel and the Palace Hotel, which had been a refuge for European royalty and gentry during the exodus caused by the First World War. Marquet was willing to help his fleeing compatriot, so Day got a room at the Palace Hotel at a good price, with no checkout date. Within the fascist universe, Day is an anomaly, as his personal diaries have been preserved. So we know for sure what his activities were in Madrid. Not only that, but it gives us a clear picture of the Nazis' and fascists' stay in Madrid. Madrid has always been a city with a vibrant nightlife. Most of the exiles wanted to socialize. They went out for a walk in the center, where they would meet with each other and plan to develop the structures of the escape routes. It was not unusual to end up these casual meetings in a restaurant, as the Osteria del Laurel or the Orsche, a well-known German restaurant, and in the famous cocktail bar, Chicote. Pierre Day received numerous letters asking for help, so together with Charles Lesca and Carlos Fuldener, they activated a transnational rat line offering help and refuge in Madrid to comrades in distress. German, French, Croatian, and Romanian fascists. Some of them were in Spanish concentration camps, and with the aid of this escape structure, they ended up living together in the capital and preparing their travel to South America.
Due to the particular circumstances of Madrid as a city, which becomes a host city for war criminals from everywhere, the streets of the capital, and especially certain areas, become a transnational melting pot of fascists from all over the world. There are Croatians, Romanians, Italians, French, Germans. But Madrid is not a huge city, and especially the center of Madrid is not particularly big. So from what we know from the diaries of some of the people involved, these people met each other. The Germans met the Italians met the Croatians met the Romanians. They used to exchange news about the war, to know how it was developing on one part of the front, or how the situation in their country was. So there was contact between Germans and Italians, between Italians and Romanians, and so on.
At that time, the Nuremberg trials began, in which war criminals were confronted by the Allied justice system. At the same time, a court sentenced Pierre Day to death.
Pierre Day, guilty, death sentence by firing squad.
This is why his plans to stay in Madrid changed. His rat line had done its job and allowed many fascists to flee. But for Day, it's time to escape before it's too late, as Charles Lesca and Carlos Fuldener, his two associates, are already in Buenos Aires. At that time, a prominent Nazi arrived in Spain, whose arrival precipitated Day's escape. On May the 9th, 1945, the Belgian citizen Léon Degrelle, founder of the pro-Nazi Rexist Party and one of the great Nazi war criminals, a member of the Waffen-SS, arrived in Spain by forced landing his plane on La Concha Beach in San Sebastian.
Léon Degrelle is this really crucial figure because he was probably Belgium's biggest collaborator with the Nazis. He'd won the Knight's Cross, he was a significant political figure within the Rexist Party, and it is said that Hitler once said to him, "You're the son I've always wanted."
Relations between the government of liberated Belgium and the Franco regime were becoming more and more tense. Belgium demanded the extradition of war criminals, something Franco's government refused to do in many cases. For example, In the case of de Grelle and Day, this convinced Day that his departure from Spain was inevitable.
He, after the war, is now in the safety of Spain. But the Belgians are really annoyed by this, and they keep saying to Franco, look, give us de Grelle, give us de Grelle. We want him back for trial and doubtless a death sentence. Franco refuses. He doesn't want to be pushed around by little Belgium. But there is this suggestion made by the Belgians, look, if you don't give us de Grelle, give us some of these more minor Nazis. You know, that'll give us enough to work on, if you like. One of those under the spotlight to be sent to Belgium is Pierre Day. And he is visited by the Spanish authorities and he's tipped off. He's given the nod, look, you know, we might extradite you. So it's possible that you might think of living somewhere else. And that's going to save us a lot of embarrassment. That somewhere else will turn out to be Argentina.
This situation convinces Day that he has to go to Argentina as soon as possible. In order to flee to Buenos Aires, Day requested papers from his Spanish contacts. It was not an easy process, let alone an immediate one. This kind of operation took time, as he tells in his diary.
After an interminable process, I obtained a Spanish passport, a special passport, in which my surname appeared, adding my mother's surname, which is Adan, with an accent on the second A, which is curiously very Spanish. And as it passed from document to document, ended up occupying the first place.
The plan was already decided, to board an Iberia plane from Madrid to Buenos Aires, with a stopover in Montevideo. Day was one of the passengers on Iberia's first transcontinental flights between Madrid and Argentina. Meanwhile, the international scenario was changing in their favor. The Cold War began to consolidate. At the expense of other issues, the Allies decided to concentrate their efforts on rebuilding Europe after the terrible devastation of the conflict. Consequently, the war criminals sought a permanent refuge away from the European powers. This did not mean that they ceased to be persecuted, but they did so more calmly and with fewer means. There were even organizations, such as Simon Wiesenthal's, which independently of Allied activities, pursued and brought to justice the most prominent leaders of the Third Reich, such as one of the architects of the Holocaust, Adolf Eichmann, and the Angel of Death, Joseph Mengele. Faced with this new scenario, hidden fascists felt gradually more secure. For most of them, the destination was clear: South America, specifically Argentina. Argentina was a good destination for escaped war criminals because during World War II, there was a deal between the SS and the Argentinian Navy Secret Service. The agreement stipulated that Argentina would grant documents to SS officers so that they could move freely in South America. In return, Argentina received information about neighboring countries such as Uruguay, Brazil, Chile, and Paraguay, as well as financial support from Germany. As for Pierre Day, he had finally reached his destination, Buenos Aires. The atmosphere in the Argentine capital was not at all unfriendly to the war criminals who had arrived from Europe. This became obvious when Pierre Day arrived at the Buenos Aires airport. There was not even a single police authority ready to extradite him. On the contrary, he met up with his friends he'd made in exile in Madrid, Carlos Fultner and Charles Lesca. They were together again in Buenos Aires and safe from Allied justice. As for Fultner, once the Third Reich had been defeated and the German regime could no longer provide any assistance to its rat line, he was already in Argentina and met with Perón to seek help in organizing a way for war criminals to leave for the South American country. Perón's regime had a positive view of the arrival of German officers, engineers, airmen, and sailors who could be very useful to the government.
Perón supported Carlos Fultner. This support was shown at a meeting in 1946 in the Casa Rosada, which led to the creation of SARE. The Argentine Society of European Refugees. It is the legal wrapping of the ratline. It was a way of structuring the ratlines, which until then had operated as improvised entities. It helps give them a clear, physical structure, with a hierarchy, statutes, a boss, a contact in the emigration office, and clear guidelines. And all this is the result of the relationship between Foldner and Perón. Moreover, at that time, Himmler is no longer part of the equation, because Himmler has disappeared. Foldner was following Himmler's orders, but he no longer had anyone on that side. Perón will fill that vacuum and become the great sponsor of that third ratline. He gave it the legal cover and structure represented by the SARE.
Thousands of Nazis, Italian fascists, and collaborationists fled to South America at the end of the war via ratlines. Argentina was the main destination for the vast majority, as they were able to arrive, thanks to the SARE, with the support of a governmental, official, and regulated body.
The Nazis arrived at the end of the 1940s, and especially from 1950 onwards, when they arrived in their droves. The highest figure I found is 50,000 Nazis, but they were everywhere in the press, because they attended political events with Perón. They didn't hide at all. While Jews were tolerated, Nazis were appreciated.
In Buenos Aires, Day and Lesca soon get their social and economic lives back on track. Day lived comfortably in the downtown Lafayette Hotel. Both frequented Argentinian high society circles where they met exiles and fascists from different countries. They attended meetings, restaurants, parties and gatherings where they could exchange ideas and set up projects and businesses with no worries. As for Johannes Bernhard, the creator of the German ratline, he finally went to Argentina in 1952, when the escape structure in Madrid was no longer needed. He settled on a farm in Tandil, a rural town 140 kilometers from Buenos Aires, called La Elena, after his wife, where he ran several businesses and activities. Eugenio Moriali, the mastermind of the Italian escape route, decided to go to Argentina, where he played an important role in the community of fascist exiles. Hans Lazar went to Brazil in 1956, but later returned to Austria, where he died in 1961. In Madrid, many collaborationists, members of the SS and other militants of right-wing extremist groups, protected by the Franco regime, stayed, such as Clarita Stauffer, who never left Madrid, where she died in 1984, aged 80. Arturo de Agostini, Otto Skorzeny, Mario Ruata, and Leon de Grelle had no problem staying in Spain. They published books, traveled, opened businesses, created families, and were even allowed to organize religious events in memory of Mussolini or even Hitler.
The main consequence is that a whole generation of European fascists manages to survive thanks to the solidarity initiated by the ratlines. So without these ratlines, many of these fascists would not have been able to flee. They would have had to have faced the sentences imposed on them by the Allies. It's not just survival, but also many of these people remained politically active in Spain, in Madrid. So Madrid became a kind of metropolis for extreme right-wing people. The domino effect of Madrid being such an important city for the ratlines is that it becomes an important space for international right-wing extremists. That melting pot of European neo-fascists that concentrates in Madrid during that time will end up fighting the last battle, which is the battle against the transition to democracy. This means helping the remnants of the Franco regime, the people who had helped them to stay in the country, to stop democratic change.
With the death of Francisco Franco, the whole network, which was hibernating, woke up. I don't think they woke up, because I don't think they were sleeping.